Number 10. Claw. Claw, which is Hulk backwards, is basically what happens when the Hulk goes Hulk. He is another one of the evil personalities inside Bruce Banner's head. This version of Hulk has black skin with these rad glowing red scars. He has red demonic eyes, white hair, and big old talons. Claw emerges when Hulk reaches a sufficient level of rage, which is strange because regular Hulk has gotten way more powerful than this version of Hulk. The Claw personality is usually suppressed and has only shown up a few times, and not for very long, I might add. He appeared first in the Axis storyline, where heroes and villains had their morality switched. Hulk isn't exactly always a perfect dude. He will go on rampages and hurt people. He doesn't intend to. Over time, he has been able to hone his rampages into one target, or even not rampage like that at all. But since Claw is his opposite, he lets his rage hurt and maim everyone, putting even the villains on alert. He looks terrifyingly awesome and no one is safe from his rage. Number 9. Infernal Hulk. On Earth 11638, Bruce Banner was officially completely done with dealing with the unpredictability and rage of the Hulk. So, when Spider-Man introduced Bruce to Stephen Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, Banner became his apprentice, and after lots of training in the mystic arts, learned how to separate himself from the Hulk entity. He did this by sending it to hell and making it a demon. And this was a great solution, until the 616 Hulk, along with Deadpool and Spider-Man, came to Earth 11638. The Infernal Hulk managed to enter back into the realm of Earth, swapping places with 616 Banner's Hulk persona. Infernal Hulk went after the new Sorcerer Supreme, Bruce Banner, who was saved by both Deadpool and Spider-Man. So, how did they defeat this demon Hulk? Well, Sorcerer Bruce reversed the banishing spell that sent Hulk to hell, and just before Infernal Hulk could return to his original Bruce Banner body, Bruce had his neck snapped, killing him. But his spirit lived on in the astral plane, so it's all good. Number 8. Marvel Apes. Marvel Apes is, well, I mean, it's all the Marvel characters as apes. It's pretty self-explanatory, actually. After Marvel Zombies, which I'm sure you're tired of hearing about, Marvel wanted another cool and weird alternate universe. So, we got this. I actually really like it, but I'm a sucker for alternate worlds. Like the regular Hulk, this Ape Hulk was a big green monstrosity. He resembled a big gorilla, and he was obviously furry. So that's like the main difference. He was still the strongest ape out there and extremely prone to smashing things whenever he got upset. This ape Hulk helped in the battle against the vampiric ape Vengers, and would later join a group dubbed the Prime 8, led by Nick Fury. Hulk smash like and subscribe button! Argh, Hulk angry but Hulk still love nerds! Argh, puny Adam, get on with video!
Number 7. Ghost Spider. Not to be confused with the other Ghost Spider, Gwen Stacy vs. 65, this Ghost Spider is an alternate version of Peter Parker from Earth 11638. In this reality, Uncle Ben did not die, and was there to help mentor Peter Parker as he continued on his journey as a hero. Peter here became not just a celebrity and an icon as a superhero, but was also a successful business owner and a philanthropist. However, in secret, he and Ben were working together to lure other Spider-Men from other realities to their world so that they could zap them of their power, killing them in the process in order to bolster Earth 11638 Spider-Man, transferring their powers to him and making him stronger. In the end, Spider-Man vs. 616, who fell into this trap, helped Earth 11638 Peter Parker to see the error of his ways. Having a change of heart, this version of Spider-Man sacrificed himself to save 616 Peter, ending up in a coma as a result. He was returned to life by an alternate Sorcerer Supreme who needed his help, and then came back as the Ghost Spider, who kinda looks like a blue flame Ghost Rider. Number 6. Mainstream Savage Spider-Man. Mainstream Savage Spider-Man comes from his own self-titled series, which spins out of Non-Stop Spider-Man. So, if you wanted to read Savage Spider-Man, I'd recommend going back and reading that first. I think it's only like 5 issues, so it's also not too long. This story, I believe, is part of the mainstream continuity, so technically the Peter Parker that we see here, in his monstrous form, is in fact Earth 616 Peter Parker. In the Non-Stop Spider-Man series, there was even mention of the Beyond Corporation, which also helped me to really cement this, at least in my mind, as part of the main continuity canon. I mean, I saw it was kinda listed as that, but I was skeptical, and then I saw that and I was like, nah, no, it's probably main continuity. I think we can definitely say it's main continuity. So hopefully I am right and not wrong about that. But while this is technically 616, it's also a very specific look and time in Peter's life, like back when he had those 4 arms, which we kind of touched on earlier. So I figured I could count it for the purpose of this list. It's also where our thumbnail for this video will likely come from, so thought it might be cool to explain it if you're like, hey, what's that thing? That's Savage Spider-Man. Savage Spider-Man is Earth 616 Peter Parker mutated by the drug known as A+, which typically improves performance at the cost of intelligence for most users. However, for Spider-Man, due to his unique physiology, it also turned him into a kinda like part man, part spider monster hybrid thing. Poor Peter. Number 5. Spidersman. Spidersman is definitely one of the creepiest ideas for an alternate Spider-Man that we've seen in maybe ever. This version of Peter Parker was actually consumed by spiders, but his consciousness was also absorbed by them. So while physically he's gone, mentally he kinda like lives on in them. He's literally a Spider-Man made of spiders. Hence the name Spidersman. He has a tragic backstory, but don't feel too bad for him. He also would be the one to team up with a Norman Osborn version of Spider-Man, plotting to betray the rest of the spider army that he had been recruited to. And he also, as a bunch of spiders, seems to enjoy kinda eating people, a taste he developed as time went on. Number 4. Patton Parnell. Patton Parnell is one of the vilest alternates of Spider-Man around. He shows up during our exploration of the Spider-Verse, where we learn that he is a fairly sadistic alternate of Peter Parker, whose hobbies include things like burning ants with a magnifying glass on hot sunny days, and spying on his neighbor whom he's kinda obsessed with, Sarah Jane. Patton, of course, is likely twisted in part because it is heavily implied that his uncle mistreats him. He is bitten by a spider, but instead of gaining miraculous abilities that all in all make him a more responsible person and a hero, he becomes a spider-like creature, mutating and becoming more monstrous and murderous, both inside and out. Yikes. Number 3. Poison. Poison is an alternate version of Peter Parker inspired by the Spider-Man story The Other. He hails from a what if where we explore the idea of what would have happened had Spider-Man rejected his connection to the spider within and rejected instead of embracing his role as a spider totem. This would have left Peter vulnerable basically to outside attack. Trapped within his cocoon with no way out, the symbiotic being that we often refer to as Venom sensed Peter's vulnerability and saw a chance to merge with him. Venom then leaves his current host Matt Gargan to forcibly connect with Peter, and together they become Poison. Poison is horrifying and attempts to recruit Mary Jane as his partner, but after she rejects him, he believes that the corpse of Gwen Stacy will suit him better. Oh dear. Number 2. Matt Gargan. Matt Gargan is known as the Spider-Man villain Scorpion, but at one point he too became an alternate version of Spider-Man, albeit a really messed up and twisted version, as he served as Spider-Man for Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers, which was primarily made up of villains posing as heroic counterparts. In Mac's case, the heroic mantle he was made to fill in for was Spider-Man, although he wasn't so much Spider-Man but kinda like an alternate Venom posing as Spider-Man. His suit was made of the symbiotic being known as Venom, who was merged with him at the time, and was also like really juiced. But Norman fixed it so that he wouldn't appear as juiced. He still kinda got like a little giant. He got a little giant when it came to him attacking people though. This often turned Matt Gargan's Spider-Man into a horrifying monster who threatened to, and often actually did, devour those people who stood in his way, even sometimes almost eating his own teammate, which obviously they did not like. Number 1. Ipek. Ipek is known in Marvel Comics as Ipek the Decapitator, and was once worshipped as a god in Peru. Remember how we talked about Man-Spider earlier? Ipek is like a more terrifying version of that being. He is typically known as having pointed teeth, snakes for hair with multiple arms, and his lower half being the hairy body and legs of a spider. He ended up getting recruited to Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers to act as their Spider-Man after Matt Gargan was Spider-Man, because this was a different version of Spider-Man, a different version of the Dark Avengers, after Norman Osborn escaped the Raft the second time, this time successfully, and then attempted to resurrect Hammer and bring back the Dark Avengers. Ipek was made to look more humanoid, more like Spider-Man with a genetic formula, except for the fact that, you know, he had 4 arms still, so almost like Spider-Man, but not quite. Later on, he would also be coerced into serving on Luke Cage's Dark Avengers, which were kinda like DC's Suicide Squad at the time.
Coming in at number 10, we've got a bit of an honorable mention for Maxwell Maxwell Lord. A businessman of the same caliber as Lex Luthor, Maxwell has hopped back and forth between the sides of good and evil many times over the course of the DC Universe's history. And while he might be best known as a villain for Supergirl thanks to the CW live-action series, Maxwell has also been instrumental in helping the Justice League, helping to found the Justice League International following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and even briefly gaining superpowers thanks to a gene bomb. However, Maxwell would soon be back to his morally dubious ways, betraying the Justice League and even killing the Blue Beetle. Not a cool way to use your new superpowers, Maxwell. Not cool at all. Coming in at number 9, we have Terra, the former member of the Teen Titans. Born with the ability of geokinesis, the ability to control and manipulate all forms of rock or earth near her body, Terra grew up as a mercenary working under the tutelage of her master, Deathstroke. And while it seemed that Terra had abandoned her past in favor of a heroic future when she joined the Teen Titans, it was eventually revealed that this was all a ruse. Terra betrayed the rest of the team so that they could be captured by Deathstroke, and while she would eventually be responsible for destroying the prison holding the Teen Titans as she began to regret what she'd done, it still was a brutal betrayal to both the Titans and their longtime readers. Coming in at number 8, we have Jean-Paul Valley, aka Azrael. Raised to be the next in a long line of super assassins created by the Sacred Order of St. Dumas, Jean-Paul was brainwashed for most of his life so that he wasn't aware of his own training. Once he came of age, he adopted the moniker of Azrael and became another dark vigilante protecting Gotham, even briefly taking over the mantle of Batman following Bruce Wayne's intense injuries at the hand of Bane during the Nightfall event. Unfortunately, his time as the Dark Knight was filled with violence and bloodshed, as Azrael began to descend back into his old training's ways, and it took a recovered Bruce Wayne to finally knock some sense into his fellow vigilante.
Okay, at number 7, Feral Man of Steel. This isn't really a version of Superman that is fundamentally changed into a monster. He's still a man, and he's still Superman, except he's been raised by a pack of wolves in the jungle. In Superman Annual number 6, a DC Comics Elseworld special tells the story of Kal-El, it's spelled K-L-L this time, a version of Kal-El where his ship actually crashes deep in the Indian jungle. There he's adopted by Mirar. It's just M, R, and R. Basically, she's a she-wolf and she raises Superman as one of her own. But of course, this leaves this version of Superman as a silent type. A wolf man who is on the verge of being entirely feral. However, deep down, the good values of the Superman we all know are demonstrated when he actually spares the life of an adventurer who kills his wolf mother and one of her cubs. Basically, feral Superman is integrated into human civilization and given the name of Clark, continuing on as a version of Superman closer to the one we're used to. At number 6, we've got Werewolf Superman. In Superman Volume 1, Issue 422, we see a cover that makes us jump for a second, thinking that our beloved Clark Kent has been overtaken by a werewolf curse. But no, this isn't actually Superman turned werewolf. What it is, though, is a werewolf who takes Superman's costume off of him and wears it. He wears it around for a while. So, for a moment, we get a pretty crazy visual of a drooling, feral wolf man wearing the Superman suit. And we're also left with another visual of a totally naked Clark Kent lying defeated on the floor, but that's neither here nor there. What's crazy about this encounter is that this werewolf actually takes out Superman, knocking him down for long enough that he's actually able to steal the costume, forcing Superman to throw on a pretty sweet one-piece tracksuit and fly somewhere that he can properly change back into his Clark clothes. Later, he finds the culprits of the werewolf serum and then takes them all out naturally, without getting bitten himself, luckily. At number 5, we've got Bizarro. The first time the world sees Bizarro is in Superboy issue number 68 in October 1958. Bizarro is created when Superman is hit with a duplicate ray and what is left is a gray-skinned, opposite version of Superman. Originally from Hertre, that's Earth backwards, yes, Bizarro and other subsequent hero opposites are under the impression that good deeds are actually against the law. But in a newer interpretation of Bizarro, he's not much of a threat to Superman, or anyone else for that matter. In the 2017 publication, he's known as sort of a a goofy monstrosity that even Clark Kent isn't concerned about. The S on his chest is backwards, he has a little chupacabra as a pet named Colin, and he has horrendous grammar. If you tell him to go right, he'll go lefty ways, and if you ask him to stop, he'll go start. Basically, everyone around him sees him as a big handful and not much more, which is good, because he's still a powerful being from another planet. At number 4 is the Superman monster. This is a classic mashup story, basically marrying Superman and Frankenstein into one. A guy named Victor Luther comes across an alien spacecraft with the remains of a baby boy within it. When he realizes that the child was supposed to have arrived intact, he devises a plan to revive the being using the body parts of dead bodies found in a local graveyard. Using the advanced alien technology from the ship, Luther creates a revival matrix and brings this monstrous version of Superman to life. But just like the classic story goes, the resulting creature doesn't quite turn out the way that Luther had planned. He's a little grayer and more decayed than he'd like, so Luther rejects him, and gets pretty badly injured in the process. The rest of the story is basically more parallels to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, so if you're interested in hearing about the story of Superman and Frankenstein mashed together, go check out the story. It's a one-off, so it probably wouldn't take very long to read. At number 3, we have Super Demon, or Etrigan. This demonic version of the Man of Steel is known as one of the many Supermen of the Dark Multiverse. His origin begins when he's rocketed to an Earth of eternal twilight from a dark planet called Camelot. Luckily, this thing still fights against evil despite his monstrous appearance. At one point, he faces off against Vampire Ultraman, who I previously mentioned on the list, and he's eventually targeted by Prophecy, who wants to steal Etrigan's powers from him. But he's able to escape with the help of Justice Incarnate and goes off to try and free the other Supermen in the Dark Multiverse. This guy has basically every power that Superman has except augmented just a little bit, and often calling on fire as the element of choice. He's got fire breath, hellfire vision, and when he recites a magical verse, is able to unleash what is only described as a burst of hellfire upon his enemies. At number 2 is Sand Superman. This entity is neither human or Kryptonian alien, but a mixture of energy from Quarm, sand from Earth, and some of Superman's powers that have been siphoned out of him. This creation is not quite a monster, but it is an uncanny recreation of the hero that honestly kind of creeps me out. Almost as much as a zombie or vampire version of Superman might. It doesn't have any soul inside of it, and for a time is set on draining even more of Superman's powers from him. Although it does come around and start to act more like Superman does, acting as a selfless superhero fighting crime and all that. It still poses a threat to Superman, and the rest of the world for that matter, because due to this creature being composed of alternately charged atoms to Superman, and only gains power when Superman loses it, and vice versa, it's known that if Sand Superman comes in contact with real Superman, there would be a devastating explosion powerful enough to destroy the planet. So yeah, Sand Superman, not to be messed with. And kind of creepy, honestly. Okay, we're at number 1, and I have to put Blackest Night Superman here. 2 words, Zombie Superman. This version of Superman comes back from the dead and terrorizes Smallville with the added powers of a Black Lantern. In the comics, he's able to read people's fear and their power levels with what seems like a built-in HUD system. He's just a predator in all senses of the word. But when they face off, Zombie Superman is able to see more human emotions in Superman than he had in the people of Smallville. Fear, love, hope, will, and on top of it all, this zombie Superman uses Superman's own mother against him, putting her life in peril, and even Clark's dog, which is where I personally draw the line. Thank God he and Superboy put an end to this undead nightmare at the end of the series. The pup also gets some blows in, which is a great little touch.
Coming in at number 10, we have Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil. After years of serving as the devil of Hell's Kitchen and attempting to bring justice to the streets of New York, Matt Murdock finally reached a breaking point after his enemy Bullseye destroyed a building with 107 innocent people inside. Taking control of the Hand, the antagonistic group of ninjas he'd long fought against, Daredevil declared martial law over Hell's Kitchen and began wearing a darker costume to show that he no longer cared about crossing the line of killing, stabbing Bullseye in the chest to drive this point home. And while Daredevil's drastic actions would eventually be explained to be partially caused by him being possessed by the Beast of the Hand, it still didn't stop him from building a literal vigilante prison in the middle of New York and crossing several lines that he still regrets crossing to this day. Coming in at number 9, we have Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier. Originally serving as Captain America's young sidekick and friend during his earliest World War II adventures, Bucky was long thought to be dead by Cap and the rest of the world following his disappearance aboard an exploding plane belonging to the villain Baron Zemo. Recovered by a Russian submarine that discovered he was only missing a single arm, Bucky was turned into the Winter Soldier, the most feared assassin in the world for decades with no memory of his true identity. And while eventually Bucky would have his memories restored due to the efforts of an unfrozen Captain America, he still was one of the most dangerous men in the entire Marvel world for many years. Coming in at number 8, we have Jason Todd, the former second Robin and the current Red Hood. Another example of a sidekick gone dark side after their apparent death, Jason Todd was the second Robin after Dick Grayson's retirement from the role, and unfortunately met a tragic end when facing a crowbar-wielding Joker. Years later, Jason Todd would reappear in Gotham City after being resurrected in a Lazarus pit, now dealing out a brand of violent justice that would make even Batman flinch and put him into conflict with many of the costumed heroes he used to call friends. And yes, eventually Jason would have his violent methods tampered down into more of an anti-hero status rather than a villain, but he still did some pretty messed up stuff after first claiming the Joker's former title of the Red Hood.
Number 7. Maestro. Okay, imagine a version of the Hulk with twice his strength who retains the intelligence of Bruce Banner. Now, take that Hulk and make him a ruthless, tyrannical ruler, power-hungry and evil, and you get Maestro. Our Hulk first comes into contact with him when Rick Jones' daughter takes him into the future to fight his evil future self. But this Maestro easily overpowers the Hulk. In their very first fight, Maestro went to town on the Hulk and won by simply snapping Hulk's neck. That's it. Game over, man! Game over! He then waited for Hulk to heal, taunting him and villain monologuing at him the whole time about all the terrible things they go through as the Hulk, trying to get Hulk to join his side. The only way our Hulk could win was to bring Maestro back in time, to when they gained their abilities. The Gamma Bomb, which destroyed Maestro on an atomic scale. The sheer idea of Hulk becoming Maestro haunted Bruce and Hulk's thoughts for the rest of time. Number 6. Null, Breaker of Worlds. When Kull Borson, known as the Serpent, who was the villainous brother of Odin, sent down 7 magical hammers to Earth that represented his 7 followers, the hammer Null found its way to our hulking mass of green, transforming him into Null, Breaker of Worlds. Null went rampaging all over South America, bringing him into conflict with the Avengers, who he defeated, and eventually into a fight with Thor. When fighting Thor, Null teamed up with Angrier, Breaker of Souls, which was the Thing, who also got one of these hammers, who was defeated by Thor. But we all know who the strongest Avenger is, don't we? Null was just a bit too powerful for Thor, and instead of facing him one-on-one, the God of Thunder threw Hulk into orbit. He landed in Transylvania and started taking on Dracula and his minions. It was only after Inca, disguised as Betty Ross, showed up that Hulk threw the hammer aside and left to go be in solitude for being used yet again. Number 5. Hulk 2099. Most of us comic book fans know about Spider-Man 2099. It's an incredible story and character, and it was crazy successful. Because of this, Marvel wanted to capitalize, like you do, and they made more 2099 versions of their characters. One such character was Hulk. This version of the Hulk is actually a guy named John Eisenhart. John didn't get his powers after being a scientist though. In the world of 2099, there was a cult known as the Knights of Banner, which, to sidetrack for a second, is a pretty sweet name. But anyways, John was a studio executive and the Knights of Banner wanted to create another Hulk while also making a movie about their cult's history. Yeah, it's weird, I don't know. Eisenhart joins the cult and gets caught in a gamma explosion, turning him into the Hulk. He was a bit different though. For starters, he is terrifying, but he can control his rage, meaning his strength didn't grow indefinitely. He also has claws that can slice through most materials, and his freaky elongated tongue is super strong, which is weird. Number 4. Hulk Venom. In What If number 4, what if the alien costume had possessed Spider-Man? Spider-Man is unable to get rid of the Venom symbiote suit, and he enlists aid from other heroes. Hulk just happens to be one of the first to show up, and the symbiote takes an instant liking to Hulk, which kinda makes me wonder why this hasn't happened before, honestly. It easily bonds to Hulk, overpowering his weak mind. So now you have all the powers of Hulk, plus the powers of Spider-Man, which is an interesting idea, truth be told. Number 3, Skulk. The Amalgam comics in the 90s brought the fans one of the things they always wished they had. The heroes of the DC Universe and the Marvel Universe coming together. It saw the heroes facing each other, but it also, more interestingly, saw mashed together versions of characters. It's how we got the Batman-Wolverine hybrid Dark Claw, who is awesome. But it's also how we got Skulk. Skulk was the combination of Solomon Grundy and the Hulk. Bruce Banner was minding his own business, conducting gamma bond tests in the desert, the kind of thing you do on your perfect Sunday, and then Solomon Grundy appeared. Bruce tried to save the superhuman zombie from the explosion, but the bomb fused the two together, forming Skulk. Skulk was really just Solomon Grundy but with the Hulk's iconic purple pants, but I feel like the powers of these two characters fused together should be way more awesome than this. Number 2, Ultimate Hulk. Yes, the Ultimate Universe's version of Hulk is similar to the regular Hulk, but his personality? Nuh-uh, honey, it is whack. Bruce Banner, no matter where you find him, is an emotionally scarred dude. It's why he is the way he is, but the Ultimate Bruce Banner? He is selfish, self-absorbed, and just creepy. He was so desperate to be noticed and recognized, he willingly injected himself with an experimental version of a new super soldier formula, turning him into a monstrous version of the Hulk. This Hulk had little to no regard for human life and collateral damage. He even ate people, it was nuts. Ultimate Hulk would join up with Maker, Quicksilver, Kang, and a mind-controlled Human Torch to make up the team known as the Dark Ultimates. He would eventually align himself to be a bit better, but not by much. Number 1, Guilt Hulk. The Guilt Hulk is very similar to Devil Hulk, who represents his anger. Only this version of Hulk represents all the guilt and regret that the Hulk feels for all the horrible things he has inadvertently done while in his Hulk form, as well as the horrible things done to him as Bruce, like being shunned and feared and all the horrible things that were done to him by his father, Brian Banner, which is a huge reason behind Bruce having multiple personality disorder in the first place. Because this persona represents all these things, it's actually more powerful than the Devil Hulk persona. Guilt Hulk even took on the form of Bruce's father inside his head before becoming his true form, which is like a weird xenomorph looking Hulk. This Hulk is incredibly powerful, and it took the combined efforts of many of Bruce's other alter egos to hold and keep the other Guilt Hulk persona repressed deep in Bruce's mind.
At number 10, we have Vampire Ultraman. This is a double alternate of Superman because he's already Ultraman, who's considered to be a dark, evil version of the hero we all know and love, but after Batman turns Ultraman into a vampire, the character just delves that much deeper into the uncanny. As if a Superman alternative gone bad isn't enough to handle on its own, this guy has a thirst for blood and takes every chance he can get to recruit more superpowered beings into his Justice League of Vampires. This is a perfect example of how messy, but also really fun, things can get when the multiverse gets involved. I think it's fair to say that Earth 43 is not a place I'd like to visit anytime soon. Okay, at number 9 we have Parallax Superman. Parallax is an evil entity that lives in the Yellow Lantern's central power battery, and he is described as the living embodiment of fear. Basically, this insect-like creature is something of a parasite that takes over a number of hosts throughout various storylines in the comics. One of those times, he takes over Superman, and the combination of these two beings naturally creates a very evil and powerful monster. And what makes it even crazier is that the origin of Parallax Superman came about by Superman's own will. In defense of a group of helpless schoolchildren, classic, Superman decides to give in to the evil parasite and allow it to steal his essence. The only way Superman is able to yield Parallax from his body is by shedding all his fears and, using Sinestro's ring, capturing and banishing Parallax forever. Phew. At number 8, we've got Vampire Superman from World's Finest, issue number 249. This version of the hero only appears for a short time in this one issue when Batman and Phantom Stranger are out at sea on a ship with a small crew. What appears to be going on is a Vampire Superman trying to turn the crewmates into fellow vampires themselves. So when Batman shines a light on Vampire Superman, sending him inside and into a coma. I don't really get why this happens, but basically Batman then attempts to drive a stake into Superman's heart, as one does if they're trying to kill a vampire. But Phantom Stranger stops him and turns the stake on the crewmates, who he reveals as being the real culprits. And for some strange, complicated reason, Superman then comes to and the crewmates are defeated and turned to coral? I don't know. This story was hard to follow, but for a time there, Superman fell victim to vampirism. And this is a scary moment because besides kryptonite, many people aren't aware that another of his weaknesses is magical enchantment, including vampirism and werewolfism. Is that the right term? Werewolfism?
Coming in at number 7, we have Robot from the Image comic series Invincible. Initially thought by his superpowered teammates to be an artificial intelligence in a metal body, Robot is eventually revealed to be a deformed boy living in a test tube, using mechanical drones to live out his dream of being a superhero. Unfortunately, following an invasion by the Flaxen dimension in which time runs much faster, Robot is trapped within this dimension for over 700 years, during which he takes over their entire planet and begins to see the value of complete control over a population. Following his return to Earth and lying about how long he was actually away for, Robot soon begins to plan for conquering this world as well, and is eventually able to wipe out any superhumans standing in his way before the countries of the world all surrender to his drone army. From a metal teen superhero to the villainous dictator of the entire Earth, Robot has definitely had one hell of a character arc. Coming in at number 6, we have Captain America, or more specifically, the version known as Hydra Cap. Initially appearing to be the main Marvel Universe's Captain America, this version of Steve Rogers had grown up indoctrinated by Hydra's fascist ideologies, and was actually sent to America to kill the creator of the superhuman serum for the Axis powers, but instead wound up deceiving his way into receiving the serum himself. Having replaced the main Steve Rogers during an event that restored his lost powers, this Hydra Cap was able to hide his evil intentions until the pivotal moment that he declared to the world those shocking words, "Hail Hydra." Coming in at number 5, we have the Incredible Hulk, or more specifically, the version that would become known as Maestro. Giving himself a new name after conquering what remains of America following a nuclear winter in a dark possible future, this version of the Hulk has become far stronger than his original gamma-green form, with years of sucking up deadly radiation only improving his ferocity and power. When the real Hulk encountered this warlord version of himself, the only way he was able to finally come out on top was by literally warping the Maestro back in time to be killed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk back in the 60s. But even since then, this future version of the Hulk still seems to keep finding ways to return and claim dominion over the world that he claims he deserves to rule. Coming in at number 4, we have Mary Marvel of the Shazam family. The older sister of Billy Batson, Mary was a fan favorite member of the Shazam family and always seemed to have her siblings' backs. However, following an event that saw the Rock of Eternity shattered and Billy Batson having to take the role of the Wizard Shazam, Mary found her powers entirely gone. Feeling alone and useless, Mary was manipulated by the villains Darkseid and Eclipso into taking Black Adam's power instead, intending for her to become the bride of Darkseid in the process. And while this plan was eventually foiled with reboots of the DC Universe since having erased Mary's evil period of her life, this corruption still shows that in the wrong hands, the power of Shazam could be absolutely disastrous. Coming in at number 3, we have the infamous Batman Who Laughs from the Dark Multiverse. In a twisted alternate world where the Joker realizes he's dying and begins a mass killing spree of everyone in Gotham, Batman is forced to finally kill his arch nemesis. Unfortunately, at the moment of death, Bruce was infected with a special brand of Joker venom that completely flipped his moral compass, but left intact all of his intelligence and planning. All of the chaos of the Joker with the brains of Batman. This supervillain is Gotham's worst nightmare come to life ever since he first crossed over into the main DC universe, and has only been able to be defeated with the entire help of the Bat family and a God mode powered Wonder Woman. Coming in at number 2, we have Superboy Prime. A jaded version of Kal-El from an alternate universe known as Earth Prime, this Superboy was the only superpowered hero on his own world, with all other heroes merely being fictional. After this reality was wiped out during the Crisis on Infinite Earths, Superboy Prime became obsessed with recapturing his past glory as the one and only Man of Steel, and slowly twisted into a psychotic version of Kal-El, determined to wipe out every other Clark Kent and destroy the entire multiverse if he has to. All of this goes to show that Superman's power is incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. Speaking of which, coming in at our top spot, we have Injustice Superman. Hailing from an alternate universe similar to the main DC universe, Superman was the most beloved hero on the planet Earth until a surprise attack by the Joker led to the complete nuclear destruction of Metropolis, and Superman being deceived into murdering his own wife and unborn child. Immediately murdering the Joker in his grief, this version of Superman snapped and declared himself the High Counselor and sole leader of Earth, essentially conquering the entire planet. With a resistance movement led by Batman facing against him, this version of Superman sank to lower and lower depths, and was only able to be finally locked away with the help of the Justice League from the main DC universe, going to show that the only thing truly capable of taking down Superman is another Superman. Coming in at number 10, we have the famous Scott Summers of the X-Men, aka Cyclops. For years best known as the leader of the X-Men that has to rely on a visor made of ruby to control the concussive blasts constantly shooting from his eyes, Cyclops eventually found himself at a breaking point after years of family-related trauma, Marvel's most infamous love triangle, and the constant stress of mutant kind constantly being attacked and hated by humanity. When mutants became an endangered species following the events of M-Day, Cyclops began to lead the X-Men in a more extremist direction, and following a conflict with the Avengers over the imminent arrival of the Phoenix Force, Cyclops lost control and wound up killing his beloved mentor, Professor X. And while it can be argued that eventually Cyclops' actions led to a better future for mutants, with Professor X and most mutants now enjoying the benefits of resurrection on the island of Krakoa, nearly wiping out the entire Avengers team along with your own father figure was definitely a dark turn for the guy named Cyclops. Coming in at number 9, we've got another member of the X-Men with Angel. One of the earliest members of the team and enabled with the ability to fly due to the feathery wings on his back, Angel was unfortunately wounded and had to have his wings removed after being attacked by the evil mutant named Harpoon. Traumatized by this turn of events, Angel was manipulated by the villain Apocalypse into agreeing to serve as one of his 4 horsemen in exchange for having his wings returned. Now known as Archangel, the Horseman of Death, he fought against the X-Men until he was finally able to be knocked back to his senses by the actions of Iceman. And hey, what are friends for if not bringing you back from the edge of being an accomplice to superpowered genocide? Coming in at number 8, we have Iron Man, aka Tony Stark. And no, I promise I'm not just talking from Cap's perspective in Civil War, although honestly, Tony did some messed up stuff in that event too. No, what I'm talking about is during an event in the 90s when a variant of the time-traveling villain Kang the Conqueror, known as Immortus, began using the neural link in the Iron Man suit to secretly begin altering Tony Stark's brainwaves. Over time, Tony's morals were slowly eroded until he was an active threat to the rest of the Avengers team, and was only able to be defeated with the help of his own heroic teenage self from the past. And while eventually, through comic book magic, Tony Stark would be returned to his usual status quo, this is still an intense example of just how dangerous an armed billionaire like Iron Man could be without any morals holding him back. Coming in at number 7, we have Phil Urick, aka the New Green Goblin. Nephew of the famous Daily Bugle reporter Ben Urick, Phil found his life turned upside down when he accidentally fell in a vat of goblin formula after finding one of Norman Osborn's old Green Goblin stashes. Taking the name of the villain, but determined to turn it into a symbol for good, this new Green Goblin attempted to be a hero in Manhattan for a time, until retiring once his equipment began to malfunction. However, Phil was desperate to chase the high of being being a costumed hero and wound up killing someone in a fight over another Green Goblin stash. Adopting the persona of the Hobgoblin, this time Phil was ready to fully embrace his true role as a goblin-themed villain. Coming in at number 6, we have Peter Parker, aka the Spectacular Spider-Man. While the mainstream Marvel version of Peter was luckily able to fight off the influence of the Venom symbiote suit and prevent himself from going full villain, there's a part of the Marvel multiverse where things turned out quite differently. Increasingly relying on the black symbiote suit to ignore all of the negative emotions and regrets that are eating him up inside, this version of Peter Parker doesn't become a dancing emo joke, but rather a darker, more violent, and completely jokeless version of himself, even going so far as to blind and kill the Hobgoblin to prevent him from even thinking about hurting anyone ever again. All of this just goes to show that maybe it's a good thing our Peter Parker took off that iconic suit when he did. Coming in at number 5, we have the mighty Thor. In an alternate universe event known as The Reigning, Thor transported the city of Asgard to float above Manhattan, only for the forces of Earth to destroy the city in an attack that cost tens of thousands of lives. Outraged by humanity's aggression against him, this version of Thor took the name of Lord Thor and began to claim the entire planet of Earth as his own, combining New York and the rubble of his old home into the city of New Asgard. By the year 2170, Thor had complete control over the people of Earth, and while he claimed that they all lived lives of happiness under his rule, Lord Thor was still determined to fight anyone who would wish to change things back to the way they used to be. Coming in at number 4, we have Professor Charles Xavier, or more specifically, the part of his mind known as Onslaught. For years, Professor X has done all he can to achieve peace and prosperity for mutant kind, while not allowing his anger at humanity to get the better of him. But over years of psychically repressing every dark and evil thought he ever had, Xavier had made the perfect ticking time bomb, and when he briefly had a mental battle with his best frenemy Magneto, a portion of Magneto's less held back personality combined with all of the darkness in Xavier's heart and created one of the most dangerous psychic creations of all time, the villain known as Onslaught. Coming in at number 3, we have Billy Batson, aka the hero Shazam. Normally a young boy who uses the power of Shazam to become one of the DC Universe's strongest heroes, this grown-up version of Billy Batson has been brainwashed and manipulated by Lex Luthor for years, convincing him that metahumans are a threat to the entirety of the world in the Kingdom Come universe. Billy would eventually be overwhelmed and use his powers again to destroy the largest metahuman prison on the planet, starting a full-scale super conflict and forcing him into a fistfight with a middle-aged Superman. And while Billy would eventually see that Lex had been manipulating him and would go on to sacrifice himself to prevent a nuclear explosion, it still goes to show that all of Shazam's powers could be catastrophic in the wrong hands. Coming in at number 2, we have the Old Man Logan version of Wolverine. Now, I definitely wouldn't say that Old Man Logan is a villain these days, but if you look back at this guy's origin story, it's just a little bit tragic as hell. In an alternate future of the Marvel Universe where supervillains have divided up the United States of America amongst themselves, it's eventually revealed that Wolverine is the reason there's no more X-Men. On the day the villains united to attack the country, Mysterio deceived Logan into believing he was protecting the mutant children of the X-Men school from evil, when in reality, he was killing his own friends and family. This was such a dark turn for Wolverine to take, even if unintentional, that he attempted to take his own life afterwards, and has spent the rest of his days trying to forget and redeem himself for what he's done. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the infamous Kid Miracle Man, aka Johnny Bates. The orphan child of an Air Force pilot, Johnny had the power to replace his body with that of an incredible superhero known as Kid Miracle Man, and served for a time as the classic sidekick of the original Miracle Man. However, after an explosion which led him to believe his mentor was dead, Johnny Bates aged into a ruthless corporate tycoon and became outraged when he discovered his mentor was still alive and had rediscovered his powers. Killing his own assistant to try and show the original Miracle Man just how far he had fallen, Kid Miracle Man was only able to be defeated whenever the original tricked him into saying the magic words that restored his original childlike body. Nevertheless, Kid Miracle Man would continue to be one of the darkest examples of a superhero being corrupted, and just how messy the world of superheroics can get.
At number 10 is Quentin Quire, aka Kid Omega, who's a prime example of an Omega level mutant who strayed down the dark path of villainy. Initially nurtured by Professor Xavier, who hoped for his potential, Quire's journey took a sinister turn. He formed the notorious Omega Gang, a group hell-bent on mercilessly attacking and, in some instances, unaliving non-mutants. What's truly remarkable, or perhaps terrifying, about Kid Omega is his status as not just an Omega level mutant, but a beyond Omega level mutant. His powers transcend the boundaries of mortality, allowing him to persist even beyond physical demise, an ability that he's exploited multiple times. But here's the twist. Quentin Quire's mental instability wasn't solely his own doing. He was a pawn in the grand scheme of Sublime, the true architect behind this nefarious substance that further warped Kid Omega's mind and corrupted his gang members. At number 9 is Mr. M. Mr. M is a name shrouded in enigma who holds a unique place among Omega level mutants who walk the thin line between heroism and villainy. This dude's abilities encompasses an astounding array from the psionic manipulation to telekinesis, telepathy, and the awe-inspiring power of energy manipulation. But his story takes a twist that mirrors the complexity of the mutant world itself. See, Mr. M's descent into darkness was triggered by a chilling prophetic vision, a harbinger of his transformation into a destroyer. You see, he believed that salvation for his cherished mutant town, a place he'd adopted after years of wandering, lay in eradicating all sickness and corruption. His intentions, albeit misguided, were fueled by a deep desire to protect his home. Though he ultimately failed in his quest, Mr. M remains an anomaly, one of the rare mutants who retained their powers after the cataclysmic M-Day event, leaving us to ponder the intricate interplay between power, purpose, and the blurred lines of heroism and villainy. If you're enjoying this video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing the notification bell. At number 8, we have Shadow King. Shadow King was born from the darkest recesses of human consciousness, and is a complex and formidable Omega-level cosmic entity turned villain. Emil Frank, the mutant vessel for this benevolent entity, who's the mutant in question, possesses the power of telepathy that rivals even Charles Xavier. His psychic dominance extends beyond the ordinary, effortlessly manipulating formidable telepaths like Marvel Girl and Psylocke. But their true menace lies in his ethereal existence, requiring a host body to manifest in the material world. This parasitic attachment grants him extraordinary powers, but also vulnerability, as the demise of his host can disrupt his astral essence for extended periods. The Shadow Man's sinister history includes collaborating with Baron von Strucker to destabilize Britain before the Second World War, aiming to reshape global politics. His awareness of future events, the rise of the X-Men, and Charles Xavier adds a layer of intrigue to his villainous persona. The Shadow King's multi-universal presence and insidious abilities make him a formidable adversary, demonstrating the dark potential of Omega-level mutants when they fall into villainy.
Coming in at number 7, we have Sinestro. While he may be best known these days as the arch-enemy of the Green Lanterns, in particular Hal Jordan, Sinestro's origins were a lot more heroic than you'd expect. Sinestro actually used to be one of the most respected members of the Green Lantern Corps, until his overseers began to notice that his sector of space was becoming more and more of a dictatorship, with Sinestro having absolute control over all the citizens he was supposed to be protecting. While he had good intentions to keep the peace, Sinestro was stripped of his green power ring, and in his rage formed the Yellow Lantern Corps to fight back against the group that he believed fundamentally wronged him. Coming in at number 6, we have the Plutonian. Hailing from the independent comic book series Irredeemable, published by Boom Studios, the Plutonian was a what if Superman started killing everyone story years before that premise became oversaturated with projects like Brightburn, The Boys, and the Injustice games. After spending years as the most beloved but mysterious superhero on the planet, the Plutonian loses his mind from the stress of his job and begins a war against the rest of his superpowered brethren by destroying a city of 7 million people. Most of this entire series is about different characters struggling to stay one step ahead of the Plutonian's killing spree, and if you're in the mood for a dark, nearly 40-issue run with a surprisingly interesting ending, I would definitely recommend it. Coming in at number 5, we have Hal Jordan, aka the Green Lantern. The 90s were an interesting time in comics as the medium continued to mature and tell darker stories after starting along that trend in the 80s, and it led to the attempted reinvention of multiple heroes. And just like Iron Man, Hal Jordan is someone who is taken in a more villainous direction. Following the destruction of his hometown of Coast City, Hal Jordan went mad with grief and killed multiple other Green Lanterns in an attempt to increase his own power. Dubbing himself the new name of Parallax, these rash actions would eventually be justified as being caused by a fear parasite of the same name, but for a time, Hal Jordan was one of the biggest cosmic threats in the entire DC universe. Coming in at number 4, we have Azi Mandas from Watchmen. Serving for years as one of the most popular vigilantes in America, Azi Mandas, or Adrian Veidt, eventually came to believe that something more drastic than heroics was needed to truly save the world. For that twisted reason, he faked an alien invasion against the world that resulted in millions of deaths to unite America and the USSR against a common foe. To do this, he needed to manipulate Dr. Manhattan, the most powerful being in the universe, into believing he should leave Earth, as to not interfere with Azi Mandas' plans. And by the time anyone realized just how far their former ally had fallen and what he planned to do, he'd already done it 35 minutes ago. Coming in at number 3, we have Jean Grey, aka the Dark Phoenix. An X-Men storyline and character turn so iconic that they've tried turning it into a movie on 2 separate occasions, Jean Grey has long been one of the ideal hosts for the Phoenix Force, a fiery power that's one of the oldest in the entire Marvel universe. And while she was originally able to contain all of this power and still use it for heroics, eventually Jean was corrupted by it, becoming the Dark Phoenix and wiping out the planet of Dabari 4, ending 5 billion lives in the process. And while it could be argued this is more the Phoenix Force's doing than Jean's, you can still expect to get some suspicious glances if your powers wound up blowing up a planet. Coming in at number 2, we have the Scarlet Witch, also known as Wanda Maximoff. Originally believing herself to be the mutant daughter of Magneto, Wanda is in reality one of the most powerful magic wielders in the Marvel multiverse, and a conduit for chaos magic that allows her to rewrite reality to her will. And after years of being unsure of her own identity and the loss of her children to the demon Mephisto, Wanda finally snapped and used her reality-changing powers to declare no more mutants, kicking off a brand new era for the X-Men as she single-handedly ensured that mutants became an endangered species. Wouldn't it just be nicer to put everyone in a 1950s sitcom again? And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the Ultimate Universe version of Reed Richards. While the mainstream Marvel Universe's version of Mr. Fantastic has consistently been a hero and inspiration to the rest of the world, his Ultimate Universe counterpart couldn't be more tragically different. Isolated with his thoughts after the disbandment of the Fantastic Four, Reed became obsessed with preventing the destruction of the Ultimate Universe, and eventually became the villainous Maker, willing to do whatever it takes to ensure his universe's survival, even if it meant the complete destruction of the rest of the multiverse. Unlike many other iconic heroes on this list, this version of Reed Richards has yet to become a good guy again, and remains an active threat throughout the multiverse that will surely come up against the real Fantastic Four again in the future.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Sandman. William Baker entered the world of comics in 1963 with Amazing Spider-Man issue 4. He was seen as one of the main villains in Spider-Man 3, and yes, he was at one point an Avenger, who knew? So when Flint Marko held the mantle of Sandman, he bumped into the Thing, and they had a little heart-to-heart, a little chat about life and how to use your abilities perhaps for, for good. So he started to help Spider-Man a bit here and there, and then in Avengers issue 329, Captain America announced a new Avengers team, and on that roster was the Sandman. He was one of the 7 reserve members. He of course didn't last because, well, he was a reserve member for one, and coming from the villain side already, I'm sure he had one foot out the door anyways. Shame. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button down below because those little thumbs up are great for the page and great for our studio. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to some Avengers who became villains. Number 9, Sentry. Making his first appearance in Sentry issue 1, of course, Robert Reynolds was a struggling addict who made his way into a laboratory and discovered something called the Golden Sentry Serum. So of course he consumed it, and then he got the surprise of a lifetime when he was then given the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. That's a lot of power. That plus a homemade costume equals a brand new superhero. Robert fought alongside the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, then the New Avengers. Things changed for Robert when Norman Osborn decided to put together a little team of his own, the Dark Avengers. So Sentry was also once a Horseman of Death, serving alongside Banshee, Grim Reaper, and Daken. He even considered himself as the heir to Apocalypse at one point, so definitely not an Avenger anymore, for sure. Number 8, Namor. King Namor is of course Marvel's version of Aquaman. He's the king of the seas, and he's also not a fan of metahumans, surprisingly. He mostly would go head to head with Black Panther and Wakanda. He wasn't a fan of Wakanda. He often attacked it quite a bit. He was asked to join the Avengers back in 1963 in Avengers issue 16, but he declined. Too cool for school. We get it. Alright, cool. He did join for a brief amount of time though, but when the Avengers vs. X-Men happened, he stood with the X-Men and he fought Luke Cage and the Thing. What a traitor. I mean, he's not the worst, but if you're not with the Avengers, you're clearly against them. Especially after you've helped them out for a bit and then you change your mind. Come on, dude.
At number 7 is Magneto. Max Eisenhardt, also known as Magneto, stands as one of Marvel's most complex characters. See, initially he embodied the quintessential mutant villain, diametrically opposing Charles Xavier's dream of mutant-human coexistence. Magneto, who was a survivor of World War II, witnessed humanity's darkest facets, making peaceful integration unimaginable for him. Instead, he advocated for mutant supremacy in a genetic war, perceiving humans as the adversary. However, Magneto's narrative trajectory defies simple classification. See, he oscillates between adversary and ally, often leading the X-Men himself. His dynamic character extends to his role as a father, overseeing the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver in the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, which evolved into a morally ambiguous faction. In contemporary storytelling, Magneto leans towards anti-heroism, driven by a fierce commitment to mutant protection. This complex evolution reflects the rich storytelling potential within Omega-level mutants, challenging the traditional hero-villain paradigm in the Marvel Universe. At number 6 is David Richards. Omega-level mutants are the creme de la crop in the mutant world, who usually stand as defenders of both mutants and humanity. But then there's David, a sinister twist in the narrative. He never reached the godlike heights of beings like Mad Jim Jaspers or Hyperion, but make no mistake, he's no ordinary mutant. Sentinels were like playthings for him. He manipulated Blink, teleportation virtuoso, into a macabre dance of suffering with thousands of innocent lives on the line. He's like, okay, imagine Professor X and Magneto and the Phoenix Force rolled into one malevolent entity, and you've got David. Thankfully, David himself never fully harnessed the Phoenix Force, but his penchant for terrorism sent shivers down spines everywhere. At number 5 is Scarlet Witch. Wanda Maximoff, also known as the Scarlet Witch, embodies the complex nature of Omega-level mutants gone awry in the Marvel Universe. Initially aligned with her father Magneto in the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, she and her brother Quicksilver transitioned to heroism by joining the Avengers. However, Wanda's tumultuous history is marked by her struggles with mental instability and reality warping powers. Her pivotal role as the antagonist in the Avengers Disassembled and House of M storylines underscores her capacity for destruction. Notably, she dismantled the Avengers, rewrote reality during M-Day, and committed mass unalivings against Earth's mutant population. These cataclysmic events highlight the pearliest consequence of when an Omega-level mutant's powers are unhinged by personal turmoil. At number 4 is Omega Red. Before you all go yapping in the comments about about how this dude's probably a beta level mutant at best. He was described by Dazzler as an omega level mutant at one point, so I'm gonna try to defend him because he's actually really cool. Born Arkady Gregorovich Razovich, I definitely butchered that, I'm so sorry, in the depths of Soviet Russia, his past was veiled in darkness. There are interpretations of his origins where he was a mass unaliver, captured because his town was really small and there wasn't very many victims. But instead of facing justice, Razovich was handed over to the KGB for a sinister experiment, an attempt to create a super soldier akin to Captain America. The result was Omega Red, a mutant wielding superhuman strength, stamina, agility, and reflexes. His body also exudes lethal pheromones, aptly named lethal spores, which can swiftly extinguish the lives of ordinary humans. Yet this is just the tip of the iceberg. Implanted within his arms are retractable carbonadium tendrils, formidable weapons capable of ensnaring victims or lashing out like deadly whips. His endurance is staggering, allowing him to battle foes, including Wolverine, for hours without fatigue. At number 3 is Legion. Born from a secret union between Charles Xavier and Gabriel Haller, his early life was marked by tragedy and obscurity. A survivor of a brutal attack, Legion's latent mutant abilities were abruptly awakened, which intertwined his mind with the consciousness of Jamiel Cabril, one of the assailants responsible for the attack. The subsequent psychic battle between his fractured psyche raged for years until he fell under the ominous influence of the Shadow King, which we talked about earlier. Under this malevolent puppeteer's control, Legion became an unwitting agent of chaos, committing heinous acts that fueled hatred and division. Eventually, when he briefly regained control, his actions still remained misguided. His attempt to fulfill his father's dream of human-mutant coexistence by assassinating Magneto backfired catastrophically, thrusting the world into an early revelation of mutants and leading to Xavier's tragic demise, thus leading to the entire events of the Age Apocalypse timeline until Bishop managed to rewrite history again by unaliving Legion himself. At number 2 is President X. In this alternate universe, Charles Xavier, who never established Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, decided to become a politician instead. Yup, that's all it took for Xavier to become the polar opposite counterpart to his 616 version, becoming completely wrathful, cruel, and a sadistic tyrant desiring nothing but total control over everyone around him. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, y'all. Though he's never revealed to be a mutant himself, it's speculated that Xavier's telekinetic abilities aided him in tracking down mutants across the nation. A stark contrast to his 616 counterpart, this Xavier exhibited a cruel and authoritarian rule, causing protests, notably from billionaire Anthony Stark. The catalyst for change arrived as Stark formed the Avengers to counter Xavier's regime, but unfortunately, Xavier's response proved devastating as a missile targeted the Avengers' Quinjet, obliterating its occupants. This tragic loss included iconic figures like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and wait a second, he took out Thor with the missile? Okay. With the big players gone, Xavier's oppressive reign expanded further, with all mutants confined to a grim prison in Texas, subjected to a psychological torment and horrific tendencies. And at number 1 is Vulcan, also known as Gabriel Summers, who emerges from the tangled web of mutant abilities as a formidable figure, overshadowing even his renowned brothers Scott and Alex. His tumultuous upbringing, marked by neglect and isolation, set the stage for his unparalleled powers. Unlike Scott's optic blasts or Alex's energy conversion, Gabriel possesses the astounding gift of energy manipulation and absorption, seemingly boundless in its potential. But what sets Vulcan apart is his ability to vicariously absorb vast quantities of raw energy and retain it within himself like a cosmic reservoir. This stored energy can be wielded at his discretion or redirected as needed, making him a walking powerhouse. In the annals of mutant classification, Vulcan has transcended traditional boundaries, earning him the elusive title of Beyond Omega Level from discerning minds like Rachel Summers. The Summers bloodline, it seems, has birthed not one, but 2 extraordinary mutants, with Rachel herself as a testament to the family's unparalleled genetic legacy.
Number 10, Man Spider. Man Spider is a version of Peter who ended up mutating and having multiple arms from the main continuity. It was a pretty freaky time in Peter's life and happened after Spider-Man tried to create a cure to get rid of his abilities and return him to his normal old depowered self. Unfortunately for Peter, this definitely did not work as planned and instead just left him with 4 arms instead of 2. Basically the opposite of the desired effect, leaving him more freaky than normal, which was kind of what he was going for. There is a version of the 4-armed Spider-Man who actually ended up keeping the arms instead of getting rid of them, and he hails from the reality of Earth 1298 and is known as Man Spider, obviously. I'm guessing that having a secret identity would be pretty tricky for someone like Man-Spider. Number 9. Savage Spider-Man. Savage Spider-Man had an upbringing among monsters, and for that reason can be considered kinda monstrous. His appearance isn't super monstrous, although he does share his editorial name with a series that seems to feature a pretty frightening looking mainstream Savage Spider-Man, which we may or may not talk about later. Savage Spider-Man of Earth 83043 ended up getting his powers from growing up in the Savage Lands. His story is that he was lost there after the plane he was on with his parents crashed. His parents died in the crash, but young Peter survived and was taken in by the giant spiders of Savage Land, whose toxic bites helped him to build up both an immunity to toxins and also granted him spider-like superpowers. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you haven't already, please head on over to Facebook where you can follow us there as well. It really does help us out here and it helps us out there. So yeah, just help us out. And also thanks for doing that. If you've already done that. You're like, I get it, Amanda, you say it every time. Just want to make sure you know. Number 8. Scarlet Spider. Kane was one of the clones of Peter Parker that we got to know in the Clone Saga. He typically goes by the mantle of Scarlet Spider now, which at one point was actually used by another Peter clone, Ben Reilly. Initially in the comics, Kane was presented more as a villain, or at least a misunderstood villain. He misunderstood hero. He wasn't really completely a straight up villain, but he did some shady things. He was a clone that was basically defective, and as a result his degeneration messed with his mind. He also came with the Mark of Cain, which was pretty monstrous, which allowed him to seemingly burn the skin of those he touched, typically leaving his Mark of Cain on their face. In reality, this was just a variation of Spider-Man's wall crawl power, as when Spider-Man crawls on walls, this is because of little hook hairs basically in his hands and feet, which allow him to stick. See the Sam Raimi movies for that in person. Similar deal for Kane, but he was using this to basically melt people's faces at the time.
Number 7. The Incredible Hulk. So Thor Ragnarok was loosely based off the Planet Hulk storyline. I say loosely because, well, the comics, that story didn't end up going so well, obviously. Because on Sakaar, the rocket that he arrived in ended up blowing to smithereens, causing some casualties that left the Hulk a little heartbroken, to say the least. So he rolls his shoulders back a few times, and then he heads back to Earth, and thus begins the World War Hulk storyline. He just destroys everybody. It's so scary. I mean, all the heroes that Earth has come to love just in the path of this death train. Like, he locks the Illuminati in Madison Square Garden and then makes them fight to the death. It's like Madison Square Up Garden. I mean, once you spend enough time on Sakaar, I guess it becomes second nature. I don't know. The whole story is a bloody good mess. It's great seeing the panic on the Avengers' faces the entire time because they know that they're screwed, and that's what makes it real and scary. Number 6. Sabretooth. Victor Creed made his debut in Iron Fist issue 14, and he's been known as one of Wolverine's biggest rivals. But during the Avengers X-Men Axis storyline, the Red Skull stole the brain of Charles Xavier, and he planned to wipe out all of mutant kind. And then in book 2, we see the inversion, where good goes bad and bad goes good. Interesting time, because Doctor Doom and Scarlet Witch cast a spell, so now Sabretooth was on the good side. So after the dust settled, Iron Man made it so that Sabretooth wouldn't flip back, so Sabretooth joined the Avengers Unity Division. This didn't last forever, and recently in House of X issue 6, Sabretooth faced trial among the Quiet Council, and let's just say he ended up swallowed by Krakoa below the surface, where he's trapped in a state of permanent stasis for the rest of his life. How comfortable. I mean, he kind of made it easy for them too. He clearly didn't fight for his case. Number 5. Hawkeye. In the MCU, Hawkeye's had it pretty rough. I mean, by the time Avengers Endgame rolled out, Clint had lost his entire family, and then 5 years after Thanos snapped his fingers, we catch up with him in Tokyo, and he's not the same guy that we once knew. Now he's taken heads and he's taken names. We get our first look at Ronan. Now, I know that Natasha meets up with him and they have a beautiful moment, and then he rejoins the team. He even volunteers to test the time travel tech himself. But if we look back at Avengers 1, Hawkeye is a villain for like most of that movie. He turns evil before the opening title even pops up on screen. He's the guy who took down the helicarrier. He almost killed everybody on that boat. Now, I know Loki had a scepter and that caused it, so if we look at Avengers 1 and Avengers Endgame, I think it's safe to meet in the middle and say that the MCU Hawkeye has been somewhat of a Avenger who turned into a villain, at least for a bit. Number 4. Quicksilver. Pietro Maximoff is the twin brother of Wanda Maximoff, and in Avengers West Coast issue 57 back in 1965, he joined the team. Pietro has been trouble for the team for a long time. I mean, he convinced Wanda to do what she did in House of M. He's framed the Avengers for treason, and he has no problem using pieces of Terrigen to give his daughter Luna special abilities, even though he knows he shouldn't do that. Also, that whole thing with Layla Miller after House of M, where he saved her life just so he can be the one to take her out, believing that she was responsible for the House of M event. Yeah, it's safe to say he went from Avenger to villain. Like, those are just 3 out of many, many things. In West Coast Avengers 33, Magneto's bloodline got the best of him, and he got fellow Avengers captured by the communist gang. Fastest guy ever, but makes the most mistakes. I don't understand. Number 3, the Vision. Making his glorious debut in Avengers issue 57, the Vision is a synthezoid, and in the comics, he was created by Ultron using parts of the original Human Torch and the mind of Wonder Man. Just bam, smack together. He turned on his original creator, Phineas Horton, and he joined the Avengers. Nice. And then in the MCU, he's created as Ultron's new body, but with the addition of the Mind Stone and a little bit of Jarvis, we have an android Avenger. Also nice. But during the Secret Empire storyline, Vision was part of Hydra's Avengers when they were taking over the world, all from an AI virus. Gotta get that firewall installed, my friend. Arnim Zola was the one to blame for that. So who knows, maybe now with the White Vision being free in the MCU and pretty much reborn, his firewall probably isn't the best either. Also, it's confusing because it appears that Vision gets all of his memories back, but then he flies away and then he's not to be seen for the rest of the show. So clearly something's up here. I'm betting the MCU does him dirty. Maybe they reprogram him to make him evil or something. Or he might become Ultron. That was a big theory for WandaVision. We'll see. Number 2, Captain America. There are a couple lines from Steve Rogers that fans will remember that took place in the MCU, like Avengers Assemble, that is America's ass, but the line Hail Hydra was followed by a roar of applause on opening night of Endgame. Why? Because not only does he use his post-Avengers knowledge to obtain the scepter, which in that of itself is already pretty sweet, but because the audience expects another cool elevator fight and Steve outsmarts us. But the line Hail Hydra comes right from the comics, in a bit of a darker scenario. The last words of Captain America Steve Rogers were that of Hail Hydra, and fans were not happy. This was huge news. People were pretty upset. Readers were sending in death threats. Like, could you imagine? The 2017 series Secret Empire concluded that bad Captain America was a double, and that the good guy was locked in the cosmic cube. Okay, solid save, but those images of evil Steve will live in our heads rent-free, so thank you for that. And finally, number 1, Scarlet Witch. Of course, I'm saving her for last, of course. She's the daughter of Magneto and the twin brother of Quicksilver, aka Pietro Maximoff. Now, she was on her father's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but at one point she did of course join the Avengers as well. She's one of the biggest Marvel characters ever, and during the events of M-Day, she spoke those 3 words, no more mutants, and just like that, a mass amount of mutants were depowered or wiped out. That large number being 986,618, only leaving a couple hundred left. That's crazy, that's like Thanos level destruction almost. And then in the MCU as well, we just watched Wanda become a villain over a 9-week period. She had a mental breakdown similar to M-Day, and she trapped Westview in her hex. Now, of course, she frees everybody and things look pretty back to normal, kind of, by the end of the show. But with that after credit scene of her studying the Darkhold, and with the given knowledge that Wanda is in the next Doctor Strange movie, she's for sure going to become a villain. Even for a little bit, she'll be a villain, for sure. I can't wait to see what else she does. She looked like she was studying up pretty fast while she was sipping tea on her doorstep, so I don't know. Her mind's crazy. She can do anything she wants.